All right, we're live.
Okay, good morning. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and it is Thursday, April 30th. And we're going to start the morning with H 928, Fish and Wildlife Miscellaneous Bill. And we've got a new draft to look at from Mr. Schuman. And just to recap, this is going to have some additional edits that came from Hannah Smith from Fish and Wildlife, as well as some fishing tournament language that was put forward by, again, Agency of Natural Resources, Brian Redmond. So we'll take a look at both of those things. But now I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, Bradley Shulman with Office of Legislative Counsel. And so we'll be looking at a draft amendment. It would be Amendment 3.1 is your draft. And so we'll just go through it. So the first three instances of, actually for 4 instances of amendment are changes to the point structure. And in particular, it will be adding some 20-point violations. I'll go over what those are. So in the first instance of amendment on page 1, we're looking at lines 7 through 10. This is a section that is being taken out of the 10-point rule violation section. And so as a reminder, there's a 10-point section and a 20-point section. So this is taking out what in the bill was the bear management rule limiting 1 bear per year. That violation is moving to a 20-point violation. And so that is a change from the bill here.
So this is taking more than 1 bear.
More than 1 bear is now will be a 20-point violation.
Okay.
And we have and so the second instance of amendment here is we're looking at line 14. This is O, and we are in the 20-point violation portion of this subsection of this section. Appendix 7 is the deer management rule, or excuse me. Sorry, that bear management rule.
Oh, bear, okay.
And we are adding some violations to the bear management rule. So the 0.4 and 4.0 and 4.1 are season and shooting hour violations. So 4.1 sets early season and late season. So if you shoot in violation of those dates, then that could be a 20-point violation. 4.2 is shooting hours, and so half hour before sunrise, half hour after sunset are the shooting hours. So shoot outside those periods, 20-point violation. 5.3 is that section that was just above that we were talking about. That is now a 20-point violation. So a person shall not harvest more than 1 black bear per calendar year. It does not include animals taken pursuant to 10 VSA 4827, which is taking a bear doing damage to your property. And so if you take a bear in that instance, it doesn't count as hunting the bear. And so with that, just a small caveat there. 6.1 is related to using dogs while hunting a bear. And so hunting with dogs is legal in Vermont unless it's otherwise prohibited. And so this permit allows folks to, or this section allows folks to use dogs. The dogs must be registered, and the hunter with the dog has to be holding a valid dog permit. And the permit shall be carried at all times by the permittee while hunting with dogs and taking a black bear. And they have to show the permit upon request for inspection by the game warden. 6.2, so this section states that individuals can only take bears legally. And a person taking a bear with the use of bow and arrow or crossbow shall on demand of the game warden or other law enforcement personnel show proof of having an archery license or having passed hunter bow education. in an appropriate course. 6.3 is hunting with dogs in packs. And so it is unlawful to have an unregistered dog, and it is unlawful to take a bear with a pack of dogs unless authorized by this statute. And
So how many are in a pack?
excuse me?
How many are in a pack?
So a pack of dogs, was that
More than one.
more than one? Yeah, and I
Is
believe.
there a limit to the number of dogs they can have? Come on,
Shall not take a black bear with the aid of more than 6 dogs.
6 dogs for one bear?
Forming a.
It's not in.
I know,
Probably,
And
Hey, that's not fair,
so,
fair.
and so a person can't use a pack of dogs to hunt a bear unless, you are authorized. So the authorization to do that is 2 or more permit holders may hunt together in combined department registered dogs to form a pack of dogs.
So there could be 2 people.
Yeah.
Each have 3 dogs,
Potentially, right?
not
And
2
so
people each have 6 dogs.
that's exactly right.
Oh,
So you
okay,
can't-
that's what I was envisioning.
Yeah, so you have to have a combination, so, you have to have a registered dog, so no person will take a black bear without a registered dog. A person taking a black bear with the aid of dogs shall only take a bear with a pack of dogs pursuant to the rule, and then you combine your animals with another hunter, but once you do that, it cannot be more than 6.
Well, can you combine more than
Yes, so you could have,
3 hunters, but you still can't have more than 6 dogs?
that is correct, so if you have, because the rule is 2 or more permit holders, so if you had 7 permit holders. Each could have 1 dog except for the 7th person, right, so you can only have 6.
And in that case, oh, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
can they only take 1 bear? Or can they take 6
If
bears?
they're permitted to hunt, different bears, let me double check, because I think if they're permitted to hunt different bears, then they can take multiple bears, right? So each
Each hunter.
hunter has a tag for a bear. And that's so you can hunt a number of bears. And there's not restriction on the number of bears.
So I wanna be clear though, this is part of the statute that's not changing. This is
So this is current law, so I'm going through all of these because I think when we're
Oh.
amending something that is changing, it's hard to also
Okay.
keep our brains.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fair, I'm also thinking about the time.
oh, okay. And so I can move on.
Okay,
And so 7.1 is not using bait, 7.2 is not advertising a service of dogs for hunting purposes. And then 7.3 is being taken out, so while hunting with dogs, no person shall have in their possession an unregistered dog while possessing department registered dog, so that is being taken out. And what is being added is upon request of the game warden, the person harvesting a bear. And the permit holder shall show and return to the kill site with the game warden, so that is being added to the 20.5 violation.
Why are they taking out the unregistered dogs thing?
I think that is a policy question, because in many circumstances when you're hunting. You can't have a certain weapon or certain arm with you. If you're hunting with like a bow and arrow or something like that. And so if you have, and so what this contemplates is that you could have registered dogs. And ordinarily, or sometimes, the department doesn't want you to have something that's unregistered. Because there might be that might create the appearance of using an unregistered dog to hunt.
Yeah.
And so that's usually the impetus for having that being a violation. I don't know the policy rationale for why they would be taking that out of the 20-point violation, and it's not in the 10-point violation.
so it's just opinion.
It's not a point violation, so it could be another civil penalty, it could be, they could require training or something else for the hunter. So they can put it another way, but that's not a point, but.
So they could have one registered dog and 5 unregistered dogs. Or 6 unregistered dogs, because the pack is only about registered dogs. So they could have 10 unregistered dogs. Who are running in a pack with 1 registered dog, and that would be legal, but that would not be a point violation.
I'm not sure if, that is a good question. And hunting with the unregistered dog is a point violation. And, so if they use those unregistered dogs to hunt, that would be a point violation. What the rule says is, while hunting with dogs, no person shall have in their possession an unlicensed dog, while possessing, department registered dogs. So does the rule contemplate more than 1 unregistered dog? That's arguable, and I think if you're charging. You know, a penalty or violation, the rule should be clearer than that, that's the issue. So those are possibilities, and those are certainly possibilities that could happen.
You have many unregistered dogs as you hunt while you're hunting,
Well, I don't think so.
why, like, what's the rationale?
Is this registration required with DFW or with towns?
Yeah, like they're registered hunting dogs. And, but you can still be out in the woods with a bunch of dogs
Essentially,
hunting. But say that only 1 dog is actually hunting, the one that's registered. And then you have 5 other dogs that are not registered.
and have it not be a 20-point violation on your hunting license. That is correct, it's still a violation, and they can still enforce that violation, otherwise, but it would not be a 20-point violation.
What would it be? You said it's not a 10-point violation, so. What is
Yeah,
it?
they could have like other civil penalties, they can require the hunter to have exclusion, the sort of require the hunter to take a class. Or they could just tell the hunter, don't do it again. But it wouldn't necessarily be the points violation.
I think I just wanna ask the department why they're making this recommendation.
Yeah, this is feeling a bit confusing.
The third instance of amendment, we are talking about, if it's okay for you, but.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about turkeys. And so,
Which are big game,
Big-
the smallest big game.
and so 4.1 is turkey season violations, 4.2 is hours. Half hour before sunrise to 12 noon are the hours actually. Legal turkey is 1 wild turkey with a beard, as that's 4.3. 4.4 is a bag limit, 2 bearded turkeys. Per person per season is the limit to hunt.
Sorry, can we back up? Is this, we're adding this to what type of violation?
Yeah, so we're adding this to a 20-point violation,
Okay.
sorry, I didn't clarify that. And these will be added to 20-point violations, and you'll see the crossed out language here. Says turkey season excluding requirements for use. Certain hunting season.
Yeah.
And so how they had this before, it wasn't pin citing to the violations. And now the statute proposes to pin cite to the violations and that would help improve clarity.
And so is it moving to 20 points from 10 or is it
It's
not?
actually just,
not.
they're maintaining the 20-point violations.
Oh,
And so
because it wasn't, as you said, pin sided to this.
that's
Right.
exactly, that's right. So in law right now, it's a description.
Okay,
And what they're doing is changing it from a description to a pin cite.
gotcha, okay.
And here's what those pin sites are.
Okay.
And then so 4.4 is the 2 bearded turkeys per season. And then 5.1 goes through season dates. So there's a bow and arrow and crossbow season, and shotgun, bow and arrow and crossbow season. And then there's open season. And then so there's various dates. I'm happy to go through these dates. Or
I think
as a matter of time, it's gonna keep going on.
It's okay.
Okay, great. Shooting hours is 5.2, bag limit, in, that season is, 150 per season. And, rifles shall not be used or carried, 6.4 is rifles shall not be used and carried by any person while hunting turkeys. And a person taking a turkey with a crossbow or bow and arrow may carry a handgun, however, that person may not use the handgun to carry a turkey. So again, it's another instance of defining what kind of implements and weapons that you can carry with you while you're hunting and the usage of those weapons. And then no person shall use dogs in the spring, nor electronic calling devices, bait, live deer, or participate in cooperative drives during any season, or either season of turkey hunting. The fourth is a deer management rule. Again, this is a 20-point violation, but what's changing here is we're moving from a description in the statute to pin sites. And here's what those pin sites are. 5.1 is a person shall not take more than 4 white-tailed deer in a calendar year and only 1 legal buck, with some exceptions. Those exceptions are listed out in the statute there, but it's just setting the parameters for bucks and white-tailed deer. The important thing to know is that there's different seasons for deers, and so, but in total, you can't take more than 4 white-tailed deer, including 1 buck, unless an exception applies. And so we're looking at some seasons, and so, number 6 is the regular season, that's 16 days before that runs 16 days, starting 12 days before Thanksgiving. And the legal limit during that season is 1 buck, and 1 antlerless deer. In that season. Season number 7, 7.1 and 7.2, are October muzzleloader season. And sets the dates for muzzleloader season. And you can take 1 antlerless deer during that season at 7.2. And a person shall not carry firearms other than 1 single barrel muzzle loading firearm while hunting deer during that season. And then we're looking at number 8.1, that's the December muzzleloader season, that sets the dates out for there. You can take 1 legal buck and 1 antlerless deer. 8.2, 8.4 is shall not carry other firearms other than 1 single barrel muzzle loading firearm. And number 9 is archery season, October 1st through December 13th, 1 legal buck through archery. And you may only take a bow and arrow, only take a deer with bow and arrow or crossbow during that season unless it's otherwise provided. And have to have a hunter's archery license. Number 12.2 is upon request, you need to return to the kill site by request of the game warden, and no baiting. You can't bait the deer is number 14. If there are no questions, I can move on to fishing tournaments.
No
Okay.
question. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah. And okay, fishing tournaments. And so this is an amendment that adds some restrictions to fishing tournaments. And so we're looking at the bottom of page 2, starting at line 14. And so individuals have to apply, and so applicants for a permit to hold a fishing tournament on the waters of the state shall be submitted on the form issued by the commissioner. We're on the top of page 3. And so any application for a fishing tournament, the Department of Fish and Wildlife shall post notice of the tournament on the department's website. And tournaments held on the Connecticut River, excluding Moore and Camden reservoirs that do not utilize an access area in Vermont are not required to obtain a permit from DFW. The department, and then this section, subsection 13, talks about best management practices to protect water quality. And so DFW shall consult with the Drinking Water and Groundwater Protection Division of the Department of Environmental Conservation to develop best management practices for fishing tournaments permitted on public waters that serve as a source for public drinking water system. And so the best management practices shall be designed to mitigate any potential impact of fishing tournament on a public water system. The best management practices shall be incorporated into fishing tournament permits issued by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So designing best management practices and then incorporating those best management practices into the permit that individuals will then be required to follow. And then, subsection B here is not changing from, statutes, other than some conforming changes, happy to go over those.
Why are you crossing out fishing permit and putting in fishing?
Yeah,
Had the
same thing.
question. Yeah,
Oh, that's interesting, it was supposed to have quotation marks. Around it,
Oh.
those were deleted, and I will put those back in.
I read that 10-9.
That is, yeah, it had quotation marks in a draft, and I won't go into the nitty gritty of how we do it, but.
why would we put in quotation marks? We
Um,
talked about quotation marks in this room
Yes.
previously, like.
Sensitive topic.
It's sort of like,
Okay.
like a fishing tournament.
Okay, you know what, so I will take the hint to discuss this with our editors. If we don't keep the quotation marks, I'm gonna take that out in the next draft.
Okay, great.
Okay. Sounds good.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge that like this is different than the language that we had in S 224. Happy to discuss this more, probably should discuss it at another time if people have thoughts about that, but at least so that we can see it, it's here, so to be continued on that aspect. Okay, thank you so much.
Very much.
Really appreciate it. Okay, so we have various things to talk about this morning, so we're gonna move now to data centers and specifically to Mr. Driscoll, who I believe is talking about water, PFAS.
Yeah.
Yep. Then we're gonna, just so you all know the plan, we're gonna shift to a bill we haven't talked about in a long time, which is 932 about the regulation of forestry under Act 250. So you have some language to show us, okay? That's great.
I sent an email.
Okay,
Morning.
great. So we're gonna shift, and then we're gonna shift back to data centers after that. So it's a little bit of some timing juggling, but that's where we're at. So, okay, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bill Driscoll for Associated Industries, or appreciate your time addressing a very small, little narrow part of the bill. No dogs or quotation marks involved. And specifically, I'm just talking about provisions in section 4, on the bottom of page 9, on the top of page 10, F and G regarding PFAS and wastewater. And this is really where we're going from. This is,
I apologize. Can you say that reference? one more
oh,
time?
sure, no problem. Bottom of page 9, top of page 10, F and G regarding PFAS. And this is from the perspective of
It's just on page 10. Are you looking at draft 1.5?
The draft. I'm also having,
as that's what I first saw.
Okay.
So in section 4, wherever that might be.
I think the issue
Don't know
is that
that.
we did the walkthrough before it had passed the house, so our version's like a little.
Okay, it's top of page 10.
Yeah.
I haven't had this passed by the house on the website.
Yeah, no, that's great. I that's,
And I don't know if anything sort of changed. I think
No.
substantive probably hasn't happened, so.
okay.
And where we're coming from this is, obviously, this is a data center bill and these provisions are specifically for that. However, we're concerned about this provision, not just for data centers, but really as a precedent for any kind of business operating in Vermont. It's related to a discussion and a problem that we had last year in developing the broader PFAS bill at that time. With regard to our one sets limits and requirements with regard to wastewater discharge, purpose PFAS. As for wastewater discharge comes from all sorts of sources. You could have something directly in the plants, it can be stormwater runoff or things like that. In other words, it comes from a number of different sources that companies may not have any control whatsoever, may have additional incidental PFAS or environmental PFAS that may be added to the runoff. So that creates a situation where you're holding a company to an account, something they can't control. And it's not only a prohibition that includes sources that they can't control, but it also creates, with G in particular, the addition of PFAS is prohibited. That creates zero tolerance, which for example, the water that comes out might actually meet drinking water standards. But because it's elevated from what comes in, it's prohibited, which so we face also having to shut down operations. So, it's nothing against obviously trying to control PFAS and monitor what's going on, but this would appear to be potentially unattainable standard, which would cause a lot of problems, not just for data centers, but this was a precedent for other operations. I think any company would be at risk if not doing the operate under those energy system requirements. This is very similar to, there was a very similar discussion last year during the PFAS bill generally about how to handle water that's used in the manufacturing process. Ultimately, some of these sort of dilemmas of inconsistencies or unintended consequences were such that the decision was made to not focus on water discharge, instead focus on how PFAS might be introduced as a product of the manufacturing process. And it was included in the first reporting requirement of ANR this January to report on how other states addressing water and manufacturing when it comes to PFAS, because it's a difficult nut to crack and certainly something worth continuing to look at, but you don't want to end up with unintended consequences. So I think our concern is like the same sort of caution should be exercised here, and I'm just gonna have a scale of recommendations. At a very minimum, we would definitely recommend deleting G that says that any addition is prohibited, because again, that'd be it's very difficult to achieve. And it may not even be relative to the actual standards that are out there for drinking water or land application or things like that. Beyond that, my understanding is I think there's probably a concern, particularly with cooling systems in data centers and whether or not there's a PFAS risk and concern there. That may speak to the actual monitoring plan that's actually submitted might be better tailored more specifically to the priority issues of concern, or to the extent maybe you ask for further feedback on how other states are dealing with the water discharge issue. Maybe even the monitoring, maybe the whole thing, F and G might be put up for recommendations in the context of what other folks are doing in the future. That's, there's obviously a range of things to do. I think the biggest priority is to delete G as written. I think maybe the whole thing would be put up, but at this point, that would be our primary. And again, this obviously could be an issue for, who knows if there's ever going to be a data center, a lot of proposed. But we would be concerned with this precedent being in the books, and then creating uncertainty about where things may go for other operations and all that stuff. So that's our concern and our request.
Do you have a sense right now of how other states are managing water quality or regulating for this?
So I don't want to speak for the department. I've talked to them about this. Even reached contacts, they have not heard of problems in other states on this front. But I don't want to speak for them. I think it's totally legitimate to have them take an actual look and report back to you guys in terms of, well, okay, what is going on, what are we doing? But yeah.
Somebody did do that. Did you say that there was a report that came out?
It's due next January.
Oh, it's due next January.
And that's for water, PFAS and water use in manufacturing.
Oh, okay, okay.
So it's not exactly this, but it's in the same ballpark.
So, yeah, okay, that will be helpful. Can I ask another?
Yes, yes.
So this G,
Mhm.
The addition of PFAS, in some areas when we talked about chemicals we use the phrase intentionally added.
Yeah.
Versus just a byproduct, like that happens in the manufacturing process. And I'm wondering if that would be, how would you feel about having that as?
So that would be an improvement. I think we have to think through how to carefully word it, but then there's the additional issue, even if it's intentionally added. And it adds PFAS to discharge. Well, what if that discharge is still meeting water quality standards? And so we have to incorporate that as well. I guess the long story short, as, yeah, certainly, yeah, there's, those ranges of concern. We've kind of, when we went through all this, thinking of alternatives and options for the PFAS bill last year, the business decision was ultimately to, get that report and sort of see, because again, there's all sorts of moving parts or considerations. So, late in this session here, we could certainly try to think about something like that, but I guess I would just submit that it might be easier, even better to take this out for now and certainly be happy to come back when we have better context. But
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are going to switch again. Thank you for bearing with me, committee, as we switch topics. So we're gonna go now to H 932. And welcome Ms. Finkelstein. I'm sorry. And dig this bill up. We haven't talked about it in a long time. This is the wood forest management. I don't think I was in the room on 250.
The testimony from the alert is on the website.
Okay, that's here.
932.
932, yes. It's way in the back of the pile. Good morning. Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Brooke Dangledy. I'm a member of the Land Use Review Board. The very first study that the legislature requested the new board to conduct was wood products manufacturing, so that we could determine how to better support that sector of industry, to make sure that we had we could streamline the permitting process, and what else could we do to try to assist with making sure the exemptions for forestry were well recognized, and also to make some other adjustments to the Act 250 law that would help and benefit our forestry sector. Kirsten Sultan, our board member, who was a long-term district coordinator for Act 250. She was our spearheading board member that conducted the study, and it was in conjunction with Forest Parks and Rec. And they were a partner in the stakeholder process. We generated a report in June of last year, and it had a number of recommendations. Part of which was to alter the statutory language of Act 250 in order to better support this sector. And two of the recommendations, number 9 and number 10, required statutory language that we then Alert and Forest Parks, we worked together to come up with language that was suitable, that accomplished all the goals and made sure that the stakeholders' concerns were addressed to the extent possible. So we were able to get that language through the House, and there was a little bit of wordsmithing at that point. And Forest Parks contacted us and said there was some concern, and they requested, and we worked on coming together to make sure that the concerns about the language was alleviated. We put additional language in to make sure that it's very clear and we want to clarify. And the two recommendations, one of them pertains to the notion that if you have a large tract of land that is being forested or under a forestry plan, that if there's development proposed for a small area of that tract of land, that the development regulation would be confined just to the areas where the development was happening or the areas that support the development, such as buffer zones or mitigation, offsite mitigation, even for primary soils, that kind of thing. Because there have been a few cases over the years that where there was some confusion or concern that because forestry is exempt from Act 250, but there was some overlap or concern that if a parcel is under Act 250 jurisdiction, we wanted to be able to make sure that that development was limited not by the boundaries of the actual parcel or lot, but within the area that was actually being developed or support the development, such that loggers are free without seeking even a jurisdictional opinion to do forestry and logging on the remainder of those large tracts of land. So that is the premise of what language for recommendation number 9 proposes. The specific language is at the very end of the memo that I prepared for your review.
That's on our website.
It's on your website. It is page 2 to 3 in the memo.
And just to interrupt, I think we have a question here.
What's the definition of a large tract?
I wish Kirsten were here to answer that question. She's our Act 250, just amazing expert. It has to do with owning and controlling property. So a tract of land can be several different lots. It has to do with the actual ownership. And it goes on the notion that Act 250, for example, if you are proposing development on one parcel of land that is defined by boundaries. You might have another parcel contiguous to or nearby that is utilized, for example, if it was a commercial venture or an industrial application. And so it depends is the answer, the best answer that I can give you.
Does it have to be the same owner?
Owned or controlled by. And so when a jurisdictional opinion, for example, is derived on, for a developer that owns, large areas of land, that analysis has to happen based on facts of the situation. Here, we want to alleviate even that process of having to be concerned, because we want to make sure that the exempt forestry activities are not impacted. Now, having said that, one thing that we do need to, and we have protected against, is the idea that forestry can happen on the non-developmental areas of that parcel. But on the development areas of the parcel, logging can certainly happen, but it cannot conflict with or violate one of the conditions that has been placed on the development when you get a permit. So, for example, if there is a buffer to a stream, we don't want logging to happen there because we want to make sure that the stream is protected. So while they are free to forest, we wanted to make sure in the language we were proposing that that doesn't give them license to violate a current condition that already exists on the land for development purposes.
So who determines if it's a large tract of land?
So what we are doing in terms of our forest products manufacturing folks is we are taking affirmative steps to make sure that they are notified ahead of time if they want to come in with a development application to say, you have this opportunity to specify to us what are the boundaries of the actual development. Limits of disturbance is one way, like some of the contractors talk about it, but those areas as well as any mitigation or buffer areas that support that development. So it's an opportunity to normally Act 250 jurisdiction attaches to the boundaries of a lot, a parcel, what have you. And this is an opportunity to segment and isolate the development without having to subdivide your property or go through any kind of process like that.
So if I can add, the phrase a large tract is not used in this language.
Can I ask a question?
Is
This, I'm not sure if this is for you or for the commissioner who's sitting right here. The term logging jobs is capitalized. I'm assuming that has a definition and it's like a weird phrase. It feels very informal, but I'm assuming it's on line 3.
Line 3 of
As passed by the house on page 2. Says that that really, and it's
Yeah.
part, your recommended changes also deal with this section, so.
Yeah.
Management, acceptable management practices for maintaining water quality on logging jobs in Vermont. I'm assuming logging jobs is a term of art.
This is the title of the
Yeah.
actual document.
It's,
Oh.
cause the whole thing is capitalized there, or like there's a whole chunk of capital.
Yeah, there's a whole, so what is this
It's-
referring to?
It's a document.
Right, it's, so what we were doing is we were patterning this after I tried to treat forest, and logging the same way that farming is in regards to this smaller area, versus the other activity of farming or logging, you know, the development versus the other. And, so in farming, you have amps,
Ramps.
reps,
Required agricultural practices.
right, and then forestry has a similar grouping of standards.
Yeah.
And this is the actual title of that document or the standards.
Oh.
That's the title,
like
the name of the
law.
document title.
I see, okay. I've never heard it, I've heard it called acceptable management practices, but I've never seen the whole thing complete, okay. It's just weird, the logging jobs, the part of it was like, it's like, what, I wasn't sure if that meant. The individual jobs, like the individual loggers or the whole job of logging a portion of land or what it meant, what it was referring to, so, but no.
Well, and just in the interest of time,
Sure.
you have some language change suggestions, which I'd like to get to.
Sure, and it's just one paragraph. And the paragraph is,
It's that paragraph, actually, I'm pretty sure.
right, it is page 2, lines 12 through 16. And that's changing 10 days, say 600138. So this is a specification about when development is proposed to occur on a parcel or tract of land that is devoted to logging and forestry. Only those portions of the parcel or the tract that support the development shall be subject to regulation under this chapter. That is the most important sentence in this provision. And then it goes on to say, in addition, permits issued under this chapter shall not impose conditions on, apply to, or restrict or conflict with the acceptable management practices for maintaining water quality on logging jobs in Vermont. On other portions of the parcel or tract of land that do not support that development plan. So what we are trying to specify and be very clear about after the first sentence, which we think is very clear in terms of what the jurisdictional lands are. But to say that permits specifically cannot impose those conditions related to forestry on the non-development areas. Because, you know, they're gonna have to not cut down a buffer in the development area if there's a stream buffer. But for the other areas, they are free as long as they're following their AMPs or, you know, for maintaining water quality and logging grounds. So it's just also specifying, don't forget you have a set of standards on that non-development, non-Act 250 jurisdictional area of your parcel. So it was, we had the language agreed to, and then there was further concern that was voiced from the wood products manufacturing folks that and forest parks, making sure that their voice was heard to make sure that this kind of specificity was provided in the actual statute so that it was clear to folks that they were free to do logging and could, it's referred to, you may have heard the concept of Stony Brook because that's the name of the case of this kind of different kind of jurisdiction subset of a parcel emanated from. So we just want to make sure that they have this available to them, and we are making affirmative steps to make sure that they know that that's available and can ask for it in the first instance. It is also available if you want to seek an amendment of your permit and can say at that point, hey, we put the whole thing under Act 250 before, and we want to retract that to this area because the rest is logging and has not been.
Okay. I feel like that's pretty clear. That's your only suggested change relative to this.
Yeah, correct.
Oh. Great, any other questions?
So,
Yes.
correct, yeah, so the board will figure out, just the commission, will figure out which portion of the parcel is, like, because there's gonna be some buffer around the development. That will get determined on a case by case basis depending on the item.
And it may be with the district coordinator working on that, before the actual application is presented to the commission. Because that's a give and take, and oh, don't forget about this area over here. So,
Okay, super, thank you so much. Commissioner, do you want to come speak at all? You can if you want to.
We're in support.
Okay, great.
If you want me to, I'm happy to if you want me to. I know time's set.
We are in a bit of
Yeah.
a time crunch, but you're in support of the language that
Yes.
Legal Dean has presented. You're in support of the,
I have written testimony I submitted.
okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, thank you so much. Fantastic. Okay, so we are gonna go now. Are you, do we need a break? Are you doing? Okay. Doing okay? Okay. Thank you for, again, thanks for bearing with me.
Alan
With this.
zoomed in here.
Oh, he's not zoomed in.
I'm saying, but he has, all right.
Okay.
We're doing data centers?
We're going back to data centers. But perhaps we should take a little break actually, because next witness is not.
Break, we'll be right back to you. So hang on and we'll get to you. Don't go away.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. We're back. Okay. Good morning again. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy coming back from a break, and we are returning to H 727 about data centers, and we are joined by Mr. McWard from NCSL. Welcome.
Yes, thanks for inviting me.
Super, and would love to turn it over to you. I know you have some information about other states, et cetera, or data centers generally to share with us. So go ahead and take it away.
Sounds good. I'm gonna share my screen
Oh,
if I can.
till 1 minute.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay.
Really wanted to. Okay, you should be all set.
Okay,
Okay.
Then could you send that testimony to me electronically? Sometime soon.
This is here. So there's some seats stuff.
Tell me.
okay, looks good.
All right, thank you. So yes, my name is Alex McWard. I'm a senior policy specialist with the energy program at the National Conference of State Legislators. NCSL is the bipartisan organization representing the legislators over 50 states and territories, and I appreciate the invitation to come here today to speak to the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. I'm going to be sharing some legislative trends we've seen around data centers, particularly surrounding the energy consumption of data centers. So I want to start off with just some background information about data centers and their energy usage. Data centers are not a new concept. They've been around for a while, but with the increased use of new technologies such as artificial intelligence, as well as expanded cloud computing and cryptocurrency mining, a lot more data centers are necessary to support these functions. And one of the major concerns about increased data center development is the energy demands from data centers. And so data centers host numerous servers that are constantly running and thus require a constant supply of energy. Additionally, these servers produce a lot of heat, so significant cooling systems are necessary to prevent equipment from overheating, which of course also requires a lot of energy. And so data centers currently account for a little more than 4% of energy consumption in the US, but this could more than double by the end of the decade. And then I included this map here from the National Lab of the Rockies, which displays the locations of data centers around the world, as well as the electric transmission infrastructure that connects these data centers. And so you can see on this map clusters of data centers in certain areas, such as Virginia and Texas. And these clusters are partly due to a variety of reasons, including the incentives that these states offer for data centers, but also a huge driver for data center operators. And where they locate is where the existing energy infrastructure is in order to easily gain access to power. So the energy consumption of data centers, of course, has started to raise a lot of concerns about its impacts on energy supply and potentially increasing the costs for ratepayers. We really started to see data centers emerge as a concern around a little over 2 years ago at the beginning of 2024, as states started to introduce legislation related to the energy usage of data centers, and this trend has continued to expand since then. Last year in 2025, we tracked over 70 bills introduced last year concerning data centers energy consumption, and so far this year, we've already tracked over 150 bills. So of course, this is an issue that continues to grow and is on a lot of policymakers' minds. And so examples of legislation we've seen include setting reporting requirements for data centers regarding their energy and water usage, tax incentives for energy efficient technology, as well as setting standards to ensure equitable utility rates. And a lot of these topics are provisions in Vermont's House Bill 727. And so I'll be discussing each of these policy topics in a bit more detail during this presentation. So perhaps the greatest trend and concern we're seeing right now is how states are approaching the cost allocation and cost recovery of interconnecting data centers to the grid. The significant energy demands of data centers is raising a lot of concerns about how utility rates will be impacted. And the expansion of data centers is going to increase energy demand overall, which of course will require new infrastructure investments for interconnection. So this means new generation facilities, transmission and distribution lines are all necessary for a lot of proposed data centers. Traditionally, a lot of large infrastructure projects have their costs recovered through increased electricity rates. However, since some of these infrastructure projects would just be constructed to serve data centers or not directly benefiting residential ratepayers, policymakers are now looking to see how to prevent these costs from shifting towards unrelated ratepayers. And so we really started to see legislation on this first emerge last year. And the states have taken a few different approaches, but for the most part, the common type of approach we're seeing is states establishing specific tariffs and customer classes for large loads like data centers. So electricity tariffs are structured pricing plans determining how consumers are charged for their electricity usage. So creating a new customer class for data center or other large loads allows specific pricing plans that are separate from other utility customers like residential ratepayers. And so example of this, Maryland last year did enact legislation requiring utilities to submit a specific rate schedule for large load customers. The rate schedule must require large load customers to cover the just and reasonable costs associated with any electric transmission or distribution build-out required to interconnect or serve the large load customer. Additionally, the legislation specifies the use of load ramp periods, as well as long-term contract commitments and exit fees, and guarantee or collateral requirements for these large load customers. The legislation doesn't specify exactly what these requirements will look like. That is more up to the discretion of the utilities and is based on the approval of the PUC. I want to note, though, that this legislation does not specify data centers, but instead uses the term large loads, which it defines as commercial or industry customers that have an aggregate monthly demand of about of at least 100 megawatts. And of course, this does encompass a lot of data centers. And we see this language in most state examples of this, where they use the term large loads, but the legislation is for the most part targeting data centers. Now, what states define as large loads can vary quite a bit. Maryland's example of 100 megawatts is actually more on the higher side. We see other states define large loads for as low as 20 megawatt customers. But we saw similar tariff legislation enacted in Minnesota and Oregon also last year. And Oregon's legislation also specified that these contracts for large load customers must be at least 10 years or longer for their large loads. Then last year also Utah enacted Senate Bill 132, which set clear rules for the interconnection process of new large loads to the grid. The bill requires large loads to pay for any interconnection or transmission related studies that are necessary, as well as any identified necessary interconnection upgrades identified by those studies. And then similarly, this year, Idaho passed very similar legislation to Utah, also requiring large loads to pay for their full cost of service for any infrastructure investments necessary to provide power, including transmission, distribution, as well as generation. And then these are just some key examples. So far in 2026, we've seen many other states introduce similar legislation to help protect ratepayers through tariffs or other methods. So building off this, another trend we're seeing in states is demand-side management programs or other measures to address data centers' energy consumption. This year, Virginia enacted legislation requiring utilities to establish voluntary demand flexibility programs for what it calls high energy demand customers. And so high energy demand customers are customers that have a demand of 25 megawatts or greater. What these demand flexibility programs will actually look like is up to the utilities and also dependent on approval from the state's PUC. However, the legislation does specify that forms of demand flexibility could include geographical or spatial shifting, dynamic voltage and frequency scaling, as well as energy storage implementation, or methods for customers to participate without curtailing their own energy uses, which would be something like a energy credit system where they can purchase energy credits from other users who do reduce their energy consumption. One of the more significant data center bills that was enacted last year was Senate Bill 6 in Texas, which set new interconnection rules for large loads. And one of the requirements is that loads of 75 megawatts or greater looking to connect to the grid must participate in a mandatory demand management program. And so this program mandates that large loads have shut-off equipment installed as a condition of their grid interconnection, and then utilities may disconnect these eligible loads during firm load shed events. And a firm load shed event is a controlled power outage ordered by grid operators when electricity demand exceeds supply. Then we also have states looking to incentivize the use of distributed energy resources to provide power directly to data centers. The greatest example of this was perhaps with House Bill 2014 last year in West Virginia. So West Virginia is a state that is very much looking to promote data center growth. And this bill created the High Impact Data Center Program to help facilitate that. But the bill also, along with that program, created the Microgrid Development Program to encourage the use of microgrids to provide energy to data centers. And so a microgrid is a group of interconnected distributed energy resources that can operate as a controllable entity, allowing it to disconnect from the grid and run in island mode. So in case there's any disruption to the greater grid, the microgrid can still provide power to local assets. And so this bill required a designated liaison to serve as a point of contact between certified microgrid districts and high impact data centers in order to coordinate their development. Then also looking at this on-site generation trend, this year Kansas introduced legislation to establish a regulatory framework that it calls private energy campuses. And so private energy campuses are privately owned properties that can generate, store, and provide electricity directly to large loads located within their boundaries. Electricity generated on these private campuses cannot be delivered outside of the property's physical boundaries. So with this framework, the legislation exempts these private energy campuses from a lot of the traditional public utility regulatory oversight, therefore aiming to facilitate the development of on-site energy generation for data centers. And then finally,
Can I interrupt you about that? So that sounds to me very much like a microgrid. So is it actually connected to the grid at large, or is it truly islanded?
so in this case, it would be truly islanded, because like a microgrid can accept and send energy
Right.
back to the grid. By being truly islanded in this case, they aim to get past a lot of those regulatory oversight restrictions. And so yes, it would just be a distributed energy resource.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And feel free to interrupt me anytime with questions throughout. Also I'd like to mention, a lot of states offer some sort of tax incentive for data centers. Now we've started to see kind of trends where states are considering making these tax incentives more dependent on energy performance. So for example, this year, Colorado and Virginia both introduced legislation that would require data centers to maintain certain energy efficiency standards to maintain the tax exemptions they receive for their equipment. Then we've also seen states consider legislation that would require data centers to regularly submit reports on their energy and water consumption to the state. So while the requirements for these reports vary by state, for the most part, they include total energy and water consumption for the reporting period, an assessment of their power usage effectiveness, and then also reports on the data center's energy sources and any energy efficiency or water conservation measures that have been implemented. Now we've seen quite a few states introduce legislation with these reporting requirements, but Nebraska actually became one of the first states this year to enact this kind of legislation requiring annual reports from data centers. And so despite the relatively high number of bills we've seen introduced that would require reporting from data centers, we've seen little action actually be enacted. And I think there's some opposition to this kind of legislation due to concerns that it'll set too strict of oversight restrictions that could drive data centers to locate in other states with less rigid requirements. So in California, for example, Governor Gavin Newsom cited similar reasons for his veto of a bill last year that would have required water consumption reporting. And then, as you can see, I also have this New Jersey veto listed here. Um, Regarding that, the New Jersey governor explained that the decision to require reporting should be left up to the Board of Public Utilities, and that the reporting metrics should remain confidential, whereas this bill would have made them publicly available. Now finally, I know that one of the additional provisions of House Bill 727 would require closed loop water systems for data centers. Water usage with data centers is more closely tracked by NCSL's environment team, so I can't go too deep on this topic myself, but we are also seeing a lot of state legislation would regulate the water consumption from data centers. So similarly, we were seeing states introduce legislation that would require closed loop water systems. So notable examples include South Carolina, Kansas, and Wisconsin. And then also, like I mentioned, along with energy reporting requirements, a lot of these requirements would also include data centers to report on their water consumption. And I would be happy to share some of these resources that our environment team has put together on the state legislation regarding data centers water usage. But as my presentation for now, I would like to note that all the examples I discussed here today are just some of the key examples. Like I mentioned, we've tracked over 150 bills this year regarding data centers and their energy usage. And those bills are all accessible on our energy database, where we have a specific data center tag. So it's very, very easy to find state legislation regarding data centers. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
I guess I do have a question. So particularly with the microgrid, the states that are requiring microgrids for true islanding, one of the possibilities there is, well, for that to work, they've got to have substantial battery backup, I know, which is sometimes referred to as like a virtual power plant. And I guess I'm wondering about, so they didn't specify that there needed to be storage. I guess I'm thinking about like all the demand side management or microgrids that all involves storage. Were there any specific requirements around storage of electricity to bring down peaks, etc.?
No, so a lot of the legislation that would specify distributed energy resources or microgrids also does include some language about energy storage. In general, I think a lot of data centers do have their own energy storage or at least backup generators involved because, I mentioned examples of these demand management strategies like in Texas where the utility would be able to shut off data centers in cases of firm load shed events. And so in that case, the data center would then, for however long that shut off lasts, rely either on their energy storage or their own backup generator. So a lot of data centers do come equipped with some sort of backup storage or energy solution.
Right, but it's not called out, or it is called out specifically in the statutes.
I'd have to revisit the language to, identify which legislation specifically.
Okay,
Yeah.
no worries. And then the demand flexibility program that you mentioned. When I hear that, I hear something that is very similar to demand side management. So like a demand flexibility programs, presumably they're intentionally managing their load to make sure that it's not exacerbating peaks. Is that sort of the idea there?
Yes, exactly. So demand flexibility, demand side management are relatively the same concept
Okay.
where basically just aiming to reduce energy consumption patterns.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to confirm that. Okay, and then I'm wondering, well, I have another question, I think, about South Dakota, which you didn't mention, which I may email you about, so. Okay, super. All right, well, any other thoughts or questions for Mr. McLeod? Oh, yes, go ahead.
So hasn't one state, most states have set 20 as the threshold, was it North Dakota lowered it to 10 or some state?
I believe one of the Dakotas, yes, has the lowest I've seen, which was between 5 to 10 megawatts. But I'd say 20 is definitely the average.
For the low threshold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Go
well,
ahead.
that's a good question. What does average mean? Average for low threshold or?
Yeah, I
Or-
probably misspoke
Ah,
there. I'd say we see more states leaning towards that 20. You don't see much below that 20, like the North Dakota. But I'd say you see more states leaning towards that 20 mark compared to Maryland, which had I think 100 megawatts as its definition of high load. And then of course it varies by state. I mean, a state like Texas, which already has a lot of data centers, probably is going to have a higher threshold for that.
Okay. Okay, all right, well, thank you very much.
Of course, I appreciate the invitation to speak.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, so nothing else on data centers for now. And just so that you all are aware of how I'm thinking about this bill, tomorrow we are gonna hear a little bit more about data centers, and then we're gonna start walking through the bill to think about open questions, parts that we're okay with, and how we're, how we want to start closing these things out or get more info. So that'll be tomorrow. Okay, so with that, we are going to transition back to the bottom. A lot of transitions today. And we're gonna hear from a number of stakeholders. And yes, thank you. So, Michael Noel from Tomra is joining us virtually. Welcome.
Hi there, Chair Watson.
Hello, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Can you
So-
hear and see me okay?
Yes, if we can turn it on just a minute, that would be great. So, and as you're aware, we have a new draft, so curious for your thoughts, comments, questions, anything you think we ought to know.
Great. And all right, so I'll go in. So what I've seen is version 4.1, which was, I believe, came out on Friday.
That's
So
it.
that is the version that I will be commenting.
I have draft 3.2. This is probably why Mike O'Grady's comments yesterday were.
Yeah.
The pages were.
Yeah, we had 4.1 yesterday.
Oh, gosh, weird. So you have 4.1.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
Yes.
My goodness, mine's not that. That is curious.
It's online and I'm
Okay.
making a copy.
That would be great. Okay, apparently everybody else has 4.1, so I think we're good. And I will catch up.
Okay, great.
So my apologies, please carry on.
Sure. So, hi everyone, in case we haven't spoken before, my name is Mike Noel. I am a public affairs director at Tomra. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment, and I definitely appreciate you reaching back out for our take, because this is important, and we want the program to succeed. So as far as version 4.1 goes, we are essentially neutral on the bill, thanks to your edits since the last time we spoke. However, I know there's been some conversation about single feed RVMs and where they fit in the new model. So I want to be clear that we would oppose the bill if it actively disincentivized reverse vending technology. So I'll spend a good amount of my comments focusing on that, just so you're up to speed on their role in deposit programs. And how much time do I have today, including Q&A? I can just kind of tailor my points to that.
That's a good question.
Half an
So
hour left.
so we've got about half an hour left, and we have, including you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 folks to get through, so not a ton of time. Yes.
Okay. I'll leave some of my technical comments for written testimony and just focus on some of the
Okay,
technology
we do
points.
have a question in the room.
Yeah, just regarding the comment you just made, Mike, about that you would oppose the bill if the RBM. We differentiated in our conversation yesterday about the RBMs where it's just one at a time going in there, and the devices where you empty the whole bag in. Does that comment differentiate between those two?
It does not, because they're deployed in deposit systems for different reasons. So if you didn't disincentivize one, it's still disincentivizing a technology that has value for multiple stakeholders in the system.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure.
Well, and I want to also clarify that, because what we had talked about was effectively keeping the status quo for the single feed reverse RVMs. And so would you be considering that a disincentive if the other was raised, or if that were somehow lowered? I guess I'm wondering about disincentivize, like what you mean by that.
Sure. So, and this is a point I was going to make, where because retailers and redemption centers are not, essentially owned by the PRO, they're independent businesses. They make their own decisions. So they're going to do where they can make more money, more profit, or at least reduce their cost the most. So if you set a higher handling fee for different redemption modalities and essentially use a lower handling fee for single feed RVMs, you're going to see more of the latter. People are going to actively move away from single feed RVMs, and that has detriments to the program and positives if they go to higher some bag drop functions or bulk RVMs. But as you'll see, there's trade-offs for that and higher costs in many cases. As a reminder, just so everyone knows, what TOMRA provides redemption technology and services across Vermont's bottle bill, has done so for decades. We provide reverse vending technology, both versions, single feed and the bulk we've been talking about. We operate the popular bag drop redemption service, known as Clink, where you can drop off, a full bag, get paid back on your phone, or donate to charity. We provide container pickup services for the beverage industry, as well as recycling processing facility services. And we're kind of the clearinghouse for the program, transitioning handling fees and deposit refunds for retailers, redemption centers, and the beverage industry, and it would be for the PRO. I serve on the board of Maine's version of a bottle bill PRO, and TOMRA operates in every U.S. bottle bill state and most international jurisdictions with a deposit program. So as I mentioned, we do support the general initiative to improve and modernize Vermont's bottle bill. It has seen better days, and statutory inaction has caused a lack of innovation, a lack of public participation, and we're kind of seeing the effects of that today. And I'll focus on the technology pieces, but again, there's a few important technical fixes that the bill would need before it's really operational, and I'll send those in my written testimony. So the first point about reverse vending technology is that they play a critical role for retailers. Reverse vending machines were primarily invented to help retailers take back containers. Previously, retailers had to take back containers by hand. It's a labor-intensive sorting and acceptance process. RVMs do this automatically, and they also streamline the billing process for refunds and handling fees, essentially removing a whole administrative step that retailers do not need to handle. The machine also compacts containers after verifying their barcode. That helps retailers save on storage space. Since then, bulk RVMs and bag drop services have been invented, but these are not universally available. Bulk RVMs are larger and more costly, making them more suitable for redemption centers, but not stores, or at least not low volume and medium volume stores. Bag drop services are more costly also, since there is added cost for transporting air, these uncompacted containers around the state, and there's higher labor costs because you need to empty every single one of those bags into essentially container recognition equipment. That doesn't need to happen for single feed RVMs that are verified at the point of redemption.
If I could, I apologize for interrupting you, Mr. Well, just really just of time, because I think we're pretty familiar with the technology at this point. So yeah, so any comments do you have about the bill, even if they're technical, that would be okay?
Okay, so I guess the point I'm making is that if beginning in 2029, under this bill, medium and large retailers will again be required to take back containers. That's new. Previously, they were essentially able to get out. This bill would bring them back into the program. What I'm saying is that there should not be an assumption that they can just switch to bag drop or they can just switch to bulk RVMs. They would either be incentivized to move in a manual direction, which carries higher cost for the beverage industry, for who's required to pick up these containers. It's higher cost for the retailer to manually handle these containers and designate a staff member to deal with it. And there's higher greenhouse gas emissions from the pickup operation. That's why single feed RVMs make sense for a low volume retailer. Vermont, again, is a low volume state because many containers do not have a deposit, water, for example, and is a relatively low return rate for deposit programs. So there's kind of not that many containers going back. So you are incentivizing you're kind of taking away an opportunity for retailers to get a raise, but at the same time, you're asking them to take on additional redemption services with the bill. The second point is more related for really more so for redemption centers, but again, setting a higher handling fee for certain redemption modalities, if you set a higher handling fee for manual collection, you're gonna see more manual collection. That's counterintuitive to the stated goal of the bill, which is partly to reduce costs, as I understand it. RVMs reduce the cost at the point of redemption via the labor savings, yes, but they also save costs for the beverage industry through the downstream impacts. It's lower cost of pickup, there's lower cost of processing, there's lower cost of clearing. So it's not just savings at the point of redemption, it's through the whole system. And here, again, incentivizing manual redemption in this way would actually create more system costs, higher system costs than there are today. And RVMs also reduce fraud because they're verifying every single container, they're compacting it, and the manual system is absolutely susceptible to fraud. If our pickup driver doesn't catch a water bottle in a bag by eye, then the distributor is going to pay for that container. That's not possible in an RVM system where every container is verified by barcode. And that's a significant risk in Vermont, where the greatest risk for fraud is containers that are already in the state but aren't eligible for a deposit water. So these are good reasons why deposit systems have incentivized rather than disincentivized at RVMs. Maine, Quebec, California have all adopted grant programs to scale reverse vending machines in their states. Last month, Connecticut passed Public Act 26-2, which includes a higher handling fee for large redemption centers that utilize barcode scanning technology, and that includes RVMs. So what I'm saying is there's good reason to incentivize technology rather than disincentivize it. At a minimum, all redemption modalities should be treated equally. If there's concerns about convenience, we share those, and that can be addressed by having additional expectations for service in the convenience standards section. We can talk about that if you'd like. And then the second point, and this will be my last one, it has to do with the section that essentially bans single feed RVMs without additional hoops being gone through. It bans single feed RVMs at the 3 locations required per county unless additional approvals are met. I can understand how the state wouldn't want to see only single feed RVMs deployed by the PRO, especially in high population areas, and say, hey, that covers our redemption requirements. They're not designed for high volume redemption, so that wouldn't make sense. However, single feed RVMs are routinely used by PROs in addition to bag drop and bulk RVMs at modern depots. So about 2 hours north of you in Montreal, the PRO has launched depots which offer bag drop, bulk RVMs, and they have 1 or 2 single feed RVMs off to the side. And they've done that, they say, so people who don't have a lot of containers can still return containers quickly, and they don't have to wait in line for a bulk RVM or a bag drop kiosk. So the bill should be edited to say that locations that the PRO uses to count towards the convenience standard can't deploy single feed RVMs alone. Not that they can't deploy single feed RVMs at all, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And then the last point is product registration, but I think we can leave that for my written testimony, but that is critical if Vermonters want to get their refunds back through bag drop or RVMs. I think that's it. I just reiterate the incentives here are really important. I don't know what the handling fee level should be. I haven't done a cost analysis, but the incentive structure is absolutely a powerful tool in these programs.
I don't know if you have this handy, but your suggestion around the 3 locations per county. Where is that? Because I'd like to make a note about that.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, no, it's there. I'm just wanting to make sure that I flag it.
Convenience standard section, I can tell you. Convenience of collection. Or maybe I can look up single. Okay, C of.
We do have, I do have one other question for you as you're. It's on page 8.
1532. It's under C, so in the PDF it is page 19.
Okay.
C.
What did he suggest? He said page 19C. No, but what did he suggest? Oh, so instead of that you can't deploy single feed RVMs at all, that it could be can't deploy single feed RVMs alone.
That doesn't count as exceptions.
Okay, right.
That's what you're saying.
So I would just add the word only before single feed RVMs there. So you can't deploy only single feed RVMs.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And one other question for you. I mean, I am hearing you about that you get what you incentivize and lack of statutory attention or not attention, that's not fair. Lack of statutory movement has caused lack of innovation. Do you have a sense though of what the if we were to talk about a handling fee for, let's say, a single feed RVM, do you have a sense of what the real cost would be for a single feed RVM? If that's not a fair question to ask, that's okay, but wanted to at least put it out.
Not off the cuff. We've done some cost analysis in places like New York, but we haven't done it in Vermont for a while. And it does differ by volume level. You know, if you have more revenue, if you have more volume, right? So it's not the same for every location.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Mr. Long? Great. All right, well, thank you so much. And please do send along your technical suggestions.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move now to Mr. Switzer. Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
Great to see everybody again. Shane Switzer, Linville Redemption. I'll try to be brief. I know we have a time constraint. It's been talked about, our position here is that we need stability. And I think the current version of the bill provides the handling fee increase that we really need. It's to the end of time that we are on the brink. And when I say we, I mean many of us are on the brink. And what this represents for our center, this penny, I did some math this week. What this penny represents for our center is we redeemed 4.4 million cans last year. It represents $44,000 next year in the green, if you will. Last year we lost almost $3,000 redeeming bottles at our center. It's just we broke down all the numbers, we broke them out from the rest of our store, and that's just the reality of the situation. So the current version of the bill, provides some of that stability, and we really appreciate that. When it comes to negotiating with the PRO, there's been a lot of talk about that here. It's like to us, the way I feel about it is it's like David versus Goliath here. Like we're gonna have to negotiate with some of the largest companies in the world. And although some of them are Vermont businesses, they just like I have a hard time getting to where we can get to how is that fair? They have the resources to be able to make sure that the rate goes down, and we just really can't, like we're our costs, I mean, we could talk about it forever, but our costs aren't going down, they're going up and up and up. So at the end of the day, the biggest thing for us is the stability that this handling fee provides in the bill. And the negotiations are tough for us. We need something to happen here where we really want to make this work. And so we're open to discussions as always, and we really need to make this bill work, or else the system's gonna collapse. And that's really, I don't have, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I don't think it's necessary. I think everybody knows where I stand, and we have formed a coalition of redemption centers recently, and so we have a group that is on board with that. So Linda, have a question?
I guess I'm talking about the proposed negotiation. I mean, as it stands in the bill right now, there's sort of it's maybe not called out specifically as a floor, but it's effectively a floor of the status quo handling fee. I'm wondering if you have any further thoughts or comments about the negotiation that is either proposed, or let's say the handling fee ended at the time that the negotiation happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like how, what I'm hearing from you is that like that negotiation is daunting.
Yeah.
And so do you have any suggestions around how to make it less daunting, or that would make you more comfortable with that?
Yeah, so again, it comes back to the comment that I made about the David versus Goliath here. I mean, I haven't heard anything that suggests that the rate is gonna go up at all. Like there's no, it's in their absolute best interest to drive the rate down. And we've heard from other redemption centers that this machinery doesn't necessarily, drive your costs down. And so that's, I would use the word negotiating with the PRO is scary. And it's just really I haven't heard anything that says that the rate is going to go anywhere but down. And in one of the examples that I used in these conversations is say I have to sign a 5-year lease next year or this year or anytime in the next year or so, I have to sign a 5-year lease. I don't know what my rate's gonna be in 4 or 5 years. How can I possibly sign a lease that brings us into the next, into the future when we don't know what that rate's gonna be. We have to negotiate, and we have to, I don't know, just the negotiation is it's scary, I guess I hate to, and so could we find a way with the negotiation? I don't know, I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything yet that tells me that we should try to find a way to negotiate with the PRO.
Okay, question?
Yeah, just to play it out, so I get your action,
Yeah.
we've heard, I think Matt saying, Bill kind of suggests that. It's set up so that the PRO actually meets you.
Yeah.
And that it has to provide a profit. And that the agency has the ability to step in if it has to make sure that I'm not suggesting how I feel about all that. I just wanted to play it out. That I believe that if Matt here might make that kind of a not, I don't know if you want to use the word counter, but might suggest at least there's those things there. So do they provide any?
So my answer to that has always been, if that's the case, if it's fair till the end of time, let's do it now. So we know, so we have the stability and there's no uncertainty in it. If that's really the case, in my eyes, that they have to provide us with a reasonable profit and it's gonna be fair and it can be arbitrated and all that. The rate, if we were to sit down and look at the rate of what it should be tied to inflation right now. That's 6-7 cents. I mean, that's a lot more than what we're talking about here. And so, so if that's true, and I've said this to Matt, if that's true, that it's gonna be fair until the end of time. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, so you're talking about the increases we've been talking about.
Yes.
Before.
Yeah.
Potentially, okay.
Yeah. Because in my mind, it's not, it can't go any lower than that, and so, that's what we're being, but that's what we're being fair.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I'm glad you guys have created a more formal group. I think that's gonna be helpful moving forward with all of this, to have an association of some kind.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure,
Yes, ma'am.
this negotiation, that is on.
Yeah.
It's each redemption center with the PRO, it's not a group negotiation, right? That's the way it's.
And that's the way that it's set up, and that's the way it's in the bill, and then the part of what Matt had mentioned, in the process is that each redemption center and redemption location has different costs.
Right.
So therefore it would be negotiated.
A different volume and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that actually brings up a question. So if. Would it be less daunting if you could do a collective negotiation, and the negotiation could have different rates for different types of centers if you negotiated that, and then it wouldn't be just like you negotiating with
Yes.
big beverage. It would be
appreciate
your
that.
association negotiating with big beverage.
It'd be slightly less daunting.
So, put language in that says that that's an option, that there could be a negotiation with.
Coalition.
Yeah, a coalition or something like that.
We talked about them.
Did we? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you need to see us on the board from the thing.
Well, I mean, I think what this is talking about is more like you guys could collectively negotiate together and,
As far as the negotiation.
yeah, your association.
Seat at the table for sure, in as a stakeholder, but yes, I'm negotiating on the goal.
Yeah, because right now it says, you know, compensation with a location that leaves, and
The
so.
reason why the answer to that is slightly and not.
Oh, of course.
There would be, you know. Lawyers,
Yeah.
things like that, we just don't easily, not that we don't have access to, that's not fair way to put it, but. We, you know, I don't have one on staff, so we don't have one on staff as a coalition.
Right.
Big beverage does, I mean, they have lawyers and policy folks and all of, you know, everything that's stacked against us here,
Yeah.
that we just, you know.
Okay, well, that's interesting because the collective bargaining came up as an option previously. So. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
To be continued.
Thank you.
Recognizing that we are gonna run out of time. We could just go to Mr. Burns for I'm anticipating that. That. We would likely not have time for Mr. Rice or Ms. Lenz, but want to get your voices in here, so if not today. What's that?
You submit as well.
Yes, yes, so. We'll figure out how to make that happen. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Paul Burns. I'm the Executive Director of EPIRG. I appreciate the opportunity to provide some additional comments in the legislation for you today. Jump right to some of the key issues quickly. As you focus obviously on the question of the handling fee, I think it's important to note that there is no conflict between recognizing the need to provide redemption centers after nearly 20 years with an increase in the handling fee and creating a PRO that would improve efficiencies generally in the system. I don't see any conflict between doing those two things. As you have just heard, and you've heard many times, many of these redemption centers are hanging by a thread. If they go out, though, it is not just a harm to the redemption center owner, to the workers there, but also to consumers. Consumers need a place that needs a center of records, so we need more of these redemption centers. And that is true because there are environmental benefits that come from the program, there are consumer convenience issues, but the whole program also becomes something more of a tax than a deposit redemption program if you don't have a place to bring back your containers conveniently. So I just think that's important to say. You've heard before, all the other costs continue to rise and have risen over the last almost 20 years since there's been an increase. And including the minimum wage, which has gone up 87.7% since the last time the handling fee was increased. So we support the 4.5 cent handling fee. I think it is more than justified. We've heard literally no evidence, as far as I know, to suggest that costs have gone down. That's not the reality of the situation. With respect to the sunset, we encourage you not to sunset this provision. Again, I see no evidence, heard no evidence that in 5 years from now that costs would be doing anything but continuing to rise. And in any such negotiations, as you were just talking about, the power rests primarily with the PRO, particularly in the absence of a handling fee floor. You heard some of the reasons why. It's also said sometimes that the PRO needs redemption centers. So that gives the redemption centers power, but that is only true up until a point. The bill right now says there must be 3 redemption centers per county and 1 in municipalities or so. That might mean that we have around 50 redemption centers at a minimum in the state. But there are more than 70 now, and that doesn't take into consideration all the grocery stores that are not currently redemption centers. We do have redemption opportunities for people now. All of those facilities, other than those that would be the designated 3, or if they are designated at all, anything beyond 3, you don't have that power. You don't, because the redemption center sometimes say, well, if they didn't have you, they would have to set up their own. That's rarely going to be the case. So you really, as a redemption center owner, don't have that power. You need me. I don't think that's a very powerful point. In fact, if you just look at the numbers there. The point is, if beyond 3 per county, the PRO holds the cards when negotiating the handling fee. That's not a winning hand, I think, for the redemption centers or for the consumers. There are, however, there is an opportunity for negotiation built into the bill right now. We support that idea. That would be particularly important if new technology is being introduced into the redemption center. So I think all of that makes sense, and that provides the incentive that Mr. Chapman and others have talked about that is important for this. And there, the redemption center actually has some power because they have a 4.5 and they're getting equipment and they can look into that. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's better, a more fair negotiating setup in that situation. Honestly, I think as Senator Hardy said in the past, I'm not sure why they need an incentive. It seems like it could just be written in, we're giving you this money, it should be used to provide the technology, that could be part of their plan. But I don't mind having this incentive there as well, the incentive being the opportunity to negotiate. With respect to single feed RVMs, I agree with Mr. Noel that we should remove the prohibition on them being used for redemption opportunities if it is in partnering or in combination with another form of redemption. That is to put the word only in there, he suggested. So I think that makes sense. But it does raise a question about the 3 per county issue again. Will they be officially designated? And what happens to Shaw's right here in downtown Montpelier, which has a reverse vending machine, not perfect, but it has an opportunity for redemption. Would those go away? If they didn't also have a bag drop off or a bulk machine there, which they're unlikely to have, so we are a municipality of 7,000 or more. It's either that or the co-op or something else, a bag drop off at Casella perhaps. But what happens to those grocery store retailers that have a single feed RBM machine now? Would that be prohibited under this? How do we know if they're one of the 3 or not? If you have a dozen in any given county, will they be formally designated? And if you're not one of the 3, are you a lesser redemption center? Still have to take everything back, but you could use a reverse vending machine. I think there's a lack of clarity around this point right now. So it's adding only, I think, is good. But I think there still is this question about what happens to particularly the retailers who have a reverse vending machine now, and that is their opportunity for redemption. Would that still be in compliance with the law moving forward? And so I think for retailers in particular and consumers, that's going to be an important question. For the penalty question, I would just say going from 10% to 25 is, I think, a step in the right direction. Hopefully, it never comes up. It's never used, not necessary. The larger it is, the more likely it is it won't be used, it seems to me. The question I have there is whether it could also apply to the implementation of the plan, not just the creation of a plan, but once a plan is, if it's created and never implemented, that too is a problem, obviously, for the functioning of the program. And so that might be one other incentive that you would consider there. I think those are my main points. I may supplement with some additional, but thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, super, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bruce? Okay, thank you so much. And recognizing that we didn't get to a couple people, we're going to adjourn for the day.